And I would like to now take a moment to introduce our panelists for the Living with Usher Syndrome panel discussion. First, I will introduce the moderators. I myself am Krista Vazzi. I'm the Executive Director of the Usher Syndrome Coalition. And we have Nancy O'Donnell. She is our Director of Outreach. I will let Nancy introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. This is Nancy O'Donnell speaking. My sign name is N over the left side of my chest, and I'm the Director of Outreach, as Krista said, and so pleased to be with this panel today.
Thank you, Nancy. This is Krista speaking. And that's one other thing I wanted to mention at the beginning of this. As we are all moving forward, let's all make sure we introduce ourselves before we're speaking. And I want to take a minute to introduce each panelist by name, and then we'll do a fuller introduction in a minute. We have with us today, Lawreen Asuncion. We have Divya Goel, Jacob Desormeaux, and Valerie Nordstrom. Now, I'm sure I've done that far too quickly for our interpreters, as I told myself I wouldn't, so I'm going to give them a minute to catch up. Thank you. Okay. Now, I want to welcome everyone to our panel discussion. And the panels with members of the Usher community have always been the highlight of our in-person conferences. And while we're still not there yet, we're so glad to be able to feature some members of the community in this forum as we're waiting patiently to all get back together again. So this is an exciting chance to get to know some other individuals living with Usher syndrome, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Nancy and I will be moderating this discussion, and I want to now take a second to introduce more fully each panelist. So I'll start with Lawreen. Lawreen is the Director of Strategic Marketing at a San Francisco Bay Area startup, Lavitas Bio. She has a bachelor's degree in biological sciences and has spent the majority of her 25-year professional career in the gene and protein space, working in both research and industry settings. While Lawreen has worn hearing aids since she was 4 years old and suspected she had Usher syndrome in her 20s, her USH2C diagnosis was only recently confirmed in January 2020 through genetic testing. Lawreen had started volunteering with the Usher Syndrome Coalition in late 2020 and aims to leverage her background to support the Usher community however she can. So thank you, Lawreen. Nancy?
Okay, this is Nancy speaking, and I have the pleasure of introducing Divya, whom I've known since she was, I'm going to say, a teenager. Divya joined Deafblind Citizens in Action in 2009. As Vice President of DBCA, she is a mentor and guide to all of the younger DBCA members. Divya has a rare form of Usher syndrome, type 3B, that's associated with the HARS, H-A-R-S gene. She is profoundly deaf and has a cochlear implant. Divya joined City Hall of Orlando, Florida in November 2019 as a digital technology assistant, service and accessibility specialist, where she helps improve accessibility citywide to people with disabilities as well as the general public. And that's Divya.
Thank you. This is Krista speaking again. I'd like to introduce Jake Desormeaux. Jake was diagnosed at the age of 7.5 with Usher syndrome type 1C. His new role in the Usher community is working on outreach for Ava's Voice. Jake was born and raised mostly outside of Los Angeles, California. He's also a part-time camp counselor for the LA School District and an actor with a passion for film, stunting, and stage combat. So welcome, Jacob. Thank you.
And our last panelist is Valerie Nordstrom. Valerie is the mother of a 10-year-old daughter, Priyanka, who was adopted from India and was diagnosed with Usher syndrome at the age of 6. Valerie has been a deaf educator for 17 years and is currently teaching kindergarten at Texas School for the Deaf. Priyanka is culturally deaf, and they use ASL to communicate at home as well as at school. Welcome, Valerie.
This is Krista speaking again. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here today. And I know we have quite a few questions already from the other USH2021 participants, but we're going to start off with some general questions to help us get to know you all a little bit better. And then we can go into those questions. And if any attendees want to submit questions for any individual panelist, they can do so in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So we will start with our first question is, you're all living such interesting lives, and we'd love if you would share a bit more about your journey. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to Usher syndrome. Lawreen, I'd love to start with you.
Hi, my name is Lawreen, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and to be a part of a panel. So I was born with a hearing loss, and the very first sign that something was wrong was my mother told me, in a nursery full of babies, oftentimes if one baby cries, everyone else joins in. However, she found that I was the only one sleeping peacefully amongst everybody. So that was her first sign. And from there, she took me to a hearing specialist to do some tests. And so I was officially diagnosed with moderately severe sensorineural hearing loss when I was 4. I was fitted with hearing aids, and I have been wearing hearing aids since then. I did go to regular school, but I did have tutoring to supplement both learning English as well as offsetting the hearing issues that I have with learning the English language. I've been able to go through regular school through university. I am still working professionally. And as Krista mentioned earlier, my connection with Usher syndrome is I have Usher's type 2C. And so I would like to leave it at that and go from there. Thank you, Krista.
Thank you, Lawreen. And let's go on to Divya. Divya, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to Usher syndrome?
Hi, my name is Divya Goel. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about how I got my Usher syndrome and a little bit about my background as well. First off, I was born into a family that's from India. And all the people in my family historically have been hearing. I'm the only one in my family that became deafblind. I'm the only one. And I was the first person in my family's history that had deafblindness. So just to give you a little summary about myself and my Usher syndrome. First, I was born deaf. And the doctors still didn't really know exactly what caused that. They still don't. So it's either there's two possibilities. One is that it was caused by sickness when my family flew from India. It's possible that I got a very high fever and became seriously ill with a very high temperature. That's a possibility because that hits a lot of people. And so that could have happened from India. And then I became deafblind. So that's one possibility, but nobody's really sure. The other possibility is that I was born with deafness and that I have something already internally in my system that caused me to have Usher syndrome. So either possibility, but we're not exactly sure. Not 100% anyway. it's hard to really know exactly what caused it and to cause me to have Usher syndrome. It's very difficult to say. The research it's very difficult to do the research to find out exactly what caused it. It's very, very hard. And at that time, which was a long time ago now, they didn't really have the technology to find out and really know. The testing didn't exist to find out what the cause could have been at that time anyway. So the doctor told my parents and told my grandparents, and they decided that they would diagnose me as Usher syndrome type 1. But that didn't seem right. It didn't seem like that's exactly what I had, but we're going to hold on to that, and I'll explain more a little bit about that later. So my vision seemed to be kind of consistent. A little bit of a hearing loss, and it declined a little bit, but then I became sick, and it just sort of started to decline even more, but not fully. I'm colorblind. I can't see colors, not true colors anyway. I can see white and I can see black, and sometimes I can't really catch it exactly if it's a light black or a dark black. You know, there's variations in that, but black and white are the primary colors that I can see, no others. But the variations in the black depend on what color I'm actually looking at. So during the daytime, I can see some, but people with Usher syndrome tend to not be able to see well at night. But the kind that I have, the Usher syndrome that I have, it's the opposite. I can see at nighttime. When the lights are very, very bright on the sides of the street at night, you know, with the street lights, the light makes it difficult. I'll stop and I won't move. The lights feel blinding to me. So the daytime feels very blinding as well. Everything is just too bright in the world. Everything outside, everything looks white in the bright light. The same as the color of the sky. The sky looks very, very white, and everything appears that way. So it's very difficult for me to discern what I'm seeing when the light is. So I have these glasses that I wear. That helps a little bit. And then later, in 2008, my parents and I went to Miami, Florida, to get a real eye test, a really deep eye test. The doctor really did a lot of testing to try to figure out and discern exactly what caused this. And it was suggested to my family that they should take a very, very specific test just to see if it's genetic, to see if it's in the DNA. So my family decided to do that. They got blood drawn, all the DNA was checked. The process went on where all of the lab work was sent to the Mayo Clinic. They had a center there where they finally were able to find the results, and that is that I truly have a diagnosis of Usher's HARS 3B. That's the true diagnosis of my condition. It's not type 1. And that's not the correct label. The correct label of my deafblindness does not connect with type 1. It's HARS 3B. And that means that it's a very, very rare condition that causes Usher syndrome. And there's only 5 people in America who have that. And we still don't know what is going on with other countries, that there might be more people that have Usher's 3B. There might be more than 5. But right now we just know of these 5 people. So we're hoping we can find more. And so research can actually be done in depth on HARS 3B to understand it better. But it's a very, very small number compared to other Usher syndromes type 1 and 2 and 3 and all the other Usher syndrome types. So this one is extremely rare. So finally, I'm actually happy to have a true diagnosis and to really identify what's going on. And it is genetic. There is a genetic component that causes HARS 3B. So they were able to discover that through the research. My parents both, on both sides of the family, they were able to discern on both sides of the family. Just my mother and my father, when they came together, the two of them together, both inside of them had HARS 3B. Oh, had HARS 3. And then together, when they created me, and I'm the eldest, then I'm fully deafblind. My brother, he's 100% normal, no problems whatsoever. And then my sister, who was the third born, they thought that she was going to be deaf. But actually, she's hearing. So she's normal as well. But she carries it. So it can cause it to happen genetically down the line because she's a carrier, just like my parents. So she needs to watch out for it in her children. So she has HARS 3, as just the same as my mom and dad. So as long as it's in the lineage, when two people who carry that come together, it causes the possibility of somebody passing it on to your children. And that's the same situation that's happening to my sister, who has to watch out for it happening in her children the same way it happened with me. So now I understand that my children also would be passing on HARS 3B. And the doctor found out and identified exactly what I have, which is HARS 3B. And that means that that now can go on through the generations. So my fiance is also deafblind. He also has Usher syndrome, but he has type 1B with MY, number 07, and then the letter A, MYO7A. That's the whole diagnosis. If we have children together, then there is a possibility that they would have extremely complex Usher syndrome, because the two of our different types together could create a much more complex Usher syndrome in our children. So we found that out through a long process and years of trial and error till we're able to get the right research done and get the results. But just to back up to the time when I was young, when the doctor really didn't understand what was going on, my family didn't understand, and they didn't have enough research, and they just put whatever label that they understood on it, and I didn't really have support from my parents, and they needed to know more about what was going on with Usher syndrome, but there wasn't enough information from the doctors. They didn't really recognize, they hadn't done the kind of in-depth research that needed to happen. So now the research is there. We just have to really inform people and inform parents. And now my parents recognize that they didn't get the right results initially, and that didn't really help them make the kinds of decisions they needed to make and to understand the progression of Usher syndrome. So now that I understand that I have 3B, it's good actually, because the research is continuing to be done in depth on Usher syndrome, and especially on my type 3B. That's it.
Thank you, Divya. This is Krista speaking. Jake, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself? Share your story.
Yeah, thank you, Krista. This is Jacob speaking. So for starting off, I was born profoundly deaf. And in the beginning of the stages of, the first few years, my family my family thought I was mute, or they thought that, I had some kind of mental illness happening because I wasn't very responsive. And when I went to the doctor actually told my parents that I did have hearing, because the hearing test that they gave me was all they did is walked around and went behind me and clapped to see if I turned around. And kids with ushers without hearing are extremely curious. So of course I'm gonna be like, what the heck is this guy doing behind me? I'm gonna go see what he's doing. And that was the hearing test. And the only person that knew I had something going on was my mother, but nobody wanted to believe her. And so until later on, when I was about 3 years old, they started noticing, okay, like he's already way past the developing ages in terms of speaking and learning and all this, what babies go through. And I didn't have my cochlear implant until I was about 4.5. And I actually ended up going to a normal school or public school, and I got by doing speech therapy on the side. And I didn't really discover that I had Usher syndrome until I was 7.5. What I have is type 1C. And with type 1C, you were born profoundly deaf, and throughout your life, by the age of 10, you will develop night blindness. And then within your 20s, that's when your sight goes. And so for me, I developed night blindness very early in terms of what was the usual standard time frame, I guess you want to call. And so with the doctors, when they diagnosed me with Usher's type 1C, they noticed that it was happening a little earlier than it should, and they were expecting me to be completely blind by the age of 20. Obviously, that is not the case. I am 22 years old now. I said not yet. So I still have vision. Most of my peripheral is gone, and I still have my center vision, and my center vision has been untouched. So fingers crossed on that. So yeah, and with that, my connection to Ushers, obviously being a young adult with Ushers, my mother and I ran a nonprofit organization for 7-8 years, making fundraising for research for cure blindness. And then over time we had to switch it to somebody else, because it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of time and money, since it was nonprofit. And so now I work as a new outreach person for Ava's Voice with Carly Frederick, and working with our future This camps. So Chris has may mention that I was a camp counselor, so it's pretty ironic that it's very fitting as to I already work as a camp counselor, and now I get to be part of the This program, which is a lot of fun, and I'm grateful to be a part of. And a little bit about me is that throughout my entire life, I worked as an actor, cliche Californian guy living outside LA. You think everybody's an actor. You might be right. But yeah, so I've been doing that since I was about 12 years old. And, the industry is very cutthroat, and the only way you can get through it is to not take things personally. And yeah, and so basically I've been able to do with that, and I have been in a movie that did take a toll on my vision and blindness, where I did work I'll give like a short story about it, but I was playing as a vampire, and I didn't have my vision because they gave me contacts that gave me major tunnel vision, and we're in a dark haunted house. And obviously, since I am playing a role on screen as a monster, I can't wear my cochlear implants, so I am doing film deaf and blind, which I have never dealt with before because I still have my vision. And it was insane, and it was challenging, but it was very fun for me because a lot of Usher's kids, you'll notice that we're not afraid to take on a challenge, and we're very competitive, whether if it's with other people or ourselves. And so I was competing with myself. It's like, I can do this. I'm gonna hit every single mark that I need to do. And it got to the point that I apparently was doing so well that the director called out the main actress for not hitting her marks and mentioned that there's a deaf and blind kid in the back that's hitting every mark and that she can't. And I, obviously being deaf on set, I didn't hear that until my mother told me after. And I was like, oh no, you did not just tell this to a major Disney star. Hopefully that doesn't take a toll on my career. And she has mentioned stage combat and stunting, and that's one of my big passions that I have for film. A lot of people say, how do you do that? Lots of training. And it's honestly more psychological than physical than you think. So honestly, whatever it is that you want to do, there's always going to be a way for you to be able to do it. And that's what I figured out with it. I will shut up. Enough about me. I'll move on back to Krista or Nancy.
Thank you so much, Jake. This is Krista. We'll give a second for an interpreter switch. And that was fascinating, Jake. Thank you very much. And I'd like to pass it on to Valerie. I'd love to hear your story, your experience adopting your daughter Priyanka and discovering Usher syndrome. And please take it away.
This is Valerie Nordstrom. Sign name is N along my right hairline. And so I'm connected to the Usher's community through my daughter. Her name is Priyanka, as you guys have already said. She's now 10 years old. Sign name for Priyanka is like a smile on her cheek with a P. So I've been in deaf education for 16, 17 years now. When I decided to adopt a child, of course, I wanted a deaf child. So I looked and looked and looked and was able to find her in India. And so I brought her home at 3.5 years old. And I have to start by saying Jake hit the nail on the head when he said, Mom knows. And that's the whole summary of our story. That I have a very clear memory of when she first came home to me, that we were playing a game and she couldn't find the things right in front of her. So the deaf educator in me was going, something's up. But of course, being the new mom, I kind of went, okay, there's just lots of other reasons. It's okay. Right. And then we moved on and she's in kindergarten. I'm like, gosh, she's really missing stuff. And the teacher's like, have you noticed she's really missing a lot vision wise? And it's a deaf school and her whole language is ASL. We communicate through ASL at home, at school, everything. So it wasn't necessarily language, it was vision. So I took her to the eye doctor, and of course was she 4 or 5 at that time? She wouldn't sit still for the tests, and I kept telling the doctor, can we test for Usher syndrome? Oh, no. It's just because you're a deaf educator. You're just too close to it. You're just thinking that's what it is. And I was like, all right, I guess we can try these other options that you're telling us. And so we tried glasses. We tried like switching glasses, 6 months, still not working, 6 months, still not working. And I kept, can we go to a specialist? Can you refer us? Can something's going on here? Oh, no. And I'm like, am I really like not realizing something? Am I making this up? Finally, I convinced the doctor to let us go and get further testing. So this was probably, I want to say 1.5 year, 2 year journey where I was like, I see it in her balance. I see it in her vision. I see it like the way she walks. I see so many things that I kept trying to tell the doctors. So I finally got a doctor. He was like, we'll give you a peace of mind. How about that? You can go so mom can have peace of mind. I was like, all right, we get the testing. Well, sure enough, she was diagnosed with Usher's. And at that point, as a parent, you go through a lot. And I felt like I was very prepared for this diagnosis. However, it was still hard. And so I want to point out to all the parents that are listening to us that we as parents, we get it. It's hard. And it's really important to have each other and attend these things and see the adults and stuff to give you that peace of mind and knowing that everything's okay. So now she is 10 in fourth grade, and we've had a lot of struggles with education. And I know that's a big hot topic for a lot of parents too. The school we were at was not providing the accommodations we needed. So we had a very big struggle to get what she deserved. We ended up packing and moving cross country because that's what we as moms do for our kids, is you do everything you can to provide everything you can for them. Now we're very, very happy here in Texas with the community we found, the resources we have, I apologize for the background. I'm a kindergarten teacher and it sounds like somebody's using my potty in the room. So sorry. Anyways, we're really happy here in Texas now, getting all these resources and everything. It's just great. I will wrap it up and pass it on.
Thank you so much, Valerie. Okay, so we will move on to our next question. What has changed in all of your lives, both positive and negative, since you learned that you have Usher syndrome or your child has Usher syndrome? This might include your use of technology, aids and devices, your attitude, relationships, goals, life choices, and or career choices. Lawreen, let's start with you.
Sure. So for me, the unique thing compared to other stories that you've heard is I didn't get an official diagnosis until fairly recently. So going back a little bit, I thought to add a little bit more because I didn't go into as much detail. So I was diagnosed with hearing at 4, and in my 20s, my optometrist suspected something was wrong because he noticed spicules in the back of my eye, in the back of a retina, but he didn't have enough information to go too much beyond that. And then in my 30s, I learned from my aunt that she was officially diagnosed with Usher syndrome, and she had connected me with her doctor that was at Stanford Medical Center, maybe as a hospital resource. But because my diagnosis didn't actually come until about a year and a half ago, everything that I had to do up to that point, I was trying to take advantage of different tools that come online. For example, closed captioning, that is becoming more popular, with the TVs and the option. There are software that you can buy online, like Otter AI, one of my favorites, that I use in the background on my iPad when I'm on conference calls, because I worry that I would miss something sometimes if I rely just on my hearing. So those tools from my situation, I've already been using them. However, since the diagnosis, what really has changed is, one, I felt like for me, it was clarity, because it's like now it's a confirmation. It's like, okay, I'm not imagining this. I really do have Usher. I understand the gene that is, the defective one for me, that allows me to keep on top of research that's going on today. It allows me to keep an eye on maybe clinical trials, that might be a potential fit. And so I feel like I can do something about it, so that part has helped. And the other half just for me is, I think, mindset. Dealing with this diagnosis, whether it's affecting yourself or whether it's affecting your child or children, is obviously very, very hard. But one of the things I finally feel comfortable with is actually sharing this, not just with family and friends, because most of them, as they come to know you throughout your life, they'll figure it out. But even with just my general network. And what I feel like it's helped is I'm confirming this, not just for myself, but for others. And in sharing that story, like everyone else here, I'm hoping that we would actually help enable each other, kind of tell you the stories and help you to see, yes, it's a disability technically. You do have impairment with the hearing and or your vision, or maybe even balance, but there's so many great tools out there available today that it doesn't mean you can't live a fulfilling life. And that has been, I think, the greatest kind of like light bulb moment for me. Feeling comfortable with the ability to talk about this with the greater community. I really think that's the end of it. And the biggest change is as far as goals. Now that I know, realistically, my hearing has stayed relatively stable throughout my life. My vision is the part where I would say over the last 3 years, I see a little bit of progression. I have my central vision. I've lost some peripheral, but not so much that I do still drive today, but I recognize that may change. And so my bucket list is changing a little bit, where I'm trying to find opportunities once we can travel again, maybe do some of the things I really wanted to do before I get to a point where I can't do them anymore in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawreen. This is Krista speaking. Divya, I would love to hear what has changed in your life, both positive and negative, since you learned that you have Usher syndrome. Would you like to share a bit about that?
So I'm going to talk about the positive and negative experiences that I've had with Ushers. So when I was in Canada, this is what I'm going to tell you about, and then after I'll talk to you about my American experience. So when I was growing up in Canada, my family did not communicate with me via sign language. We spoke, I had to read lips. They spoke in Indian language and some English. And they had to learn how to communicate with me. At that time, I did not know sign language. I learned sign language at the age of 7, and that is late. That affected my education, my ability to learn language. So when I went to Metro Toronto School for the Deaf, and that was where I was able to learn sign language. I really didn't understand anything about being deaf or blind. I wasn't able to comprehend it at that time, but I did start learning and utilizing sign language pretty quickly. And it was Canadian Sign Language at the time. And my mom had to learn sign language because it was very important for her to communicate with me. And my mom learned English Sign Language to communicate with me. So I utilized English Sign Language as well to communicate with Mom. My dad can only sign a tiny little bit. He can fingerspell, and we developed a home sign for Dad to utilize. It was really difficult for him. But luckily, I had my brothers and my sister, my brother and my sister. My brother, not so much. He's not so good at sign language, but my sister became very proficient, and she is a great advocate to me, very supportive. And we are able to work together to communicate at home. Now, that was my Canadian story and my experience in the Canadian school system. When I was there, I had an intervener. And this is the sign for intervener, it's IV. And in American Sign Language, we sign it like mentor. So when I was in Canada and I had the intervener, they taught me sign language. I worked with the intervener, I worked with the teacher, I learned to utilize a cane, I learned to use CCTV. So they gave me the ability to have access and access my education. It was positive. However, there was some negatives there. I had no friends. I had no social life. I had no one to play with. I had no one to socialize with because no one knew what I needed because of my vision. It was still being developed. How, my sign language was I was still working on developing that. So it was very difficult and very unfortunate at that time because I had really a hard time communicating what I needed with friends and family and so on. And then we moved to America. And really, that was the worst thing in my life when we moved to America. It was not successful. I went to Florida School for the Deaf and Blind in St. Augustine. And I was there for 7.5 years. Most of my experience there was negative. And the reason why is because they didn't provide access to me regarding my education. It was just, the services weren't good. Perhaps today's services are better, but at the time when I went, the services were not good. And a lot of negative experiences. I didn't receive the support I needed regarding my hearing and regarding my vision. Neither side, the blind or the deaf, agreed on what was best for me. And I had to fight for my rights, for my education. It was a very unsatisfying time. It was a pity party time. It was very negative. It was a very oppressive, discriminatory. I didn't get any accessibility. However, the positive thing was I did build my self-esteem. I was able to join different events. I was in a beauty pageant. I actually was in it 3 times and I did win. I was able to show them that I can beat the odds with being deaf and blind, and I was able to overcome it. A lot of times they thought that I wouldn't be able to do it, but once they saw me, they were just blown away that a deaf blind person was able to do this. And my talent was dancing. I won for that skill. And on the 3rd year, I actually won the crown and I was the queen. So, but going back to the school experience in Florida, I was not happy there. It was very sad. And I needed to be pretty assertive or even aggressive to get my IEP and everything regarding my education right. I had to fight for myself. I needed to fight for my future, for my education. And I decided then to move to a public school in Orlando, Florida. I transferred. And we spoke regarding my accommodations, and they were willing to give me everything I needed. And then finally, I was able to get a good education. I took 8 courses for 2.5 years. I mean, usually it takes 4 years in high school, but I took it in 2.5 years. I took as much as I could. I wasn't going to let anybody pity me. I just went ahead and showed them that I can do it. I empowered myself. I had to believe in myself that I can overcome, and I could graduate high school with a real diploma and then go on to college. And I did go on to college, and they were very supportive to me as well. They were very open to my needs, accessibility-wise, and I was very successful. So Usher syndrome has not stopped me.
Thank you, Divya. I think your self-advocacy is incredibly impressive, and I'm sure everyone in the community, whether they're a parent or an individual with Usher syndrome, can speak to the importance of that. So I'm so glad that you were able to be so successful in advocating for yourself. We'll move on to Jake. I know you've known about your Usher syndrome since you were 7.5. So most of your life, you've been just, living your life with ushers, but has it changed your perspective? Has it changed your goals, your anything in your life that has changed either positive or negative?
So this is Jacob speaking. Obviously, of course, with diagnosis of ushers, it is going to change a lot of things and how you think about things. But for me, I felt like in terms of my mindset, it did a lot of good more than bad. Because with knowing ushers and being told by the doctors that I only have very short years of sight and vision in my life, and it's made me more appreciative about what is around my life. And honestly, because of that, it makes me want to take advantage of every single opportunity that there is, and whether it's traveling, whether it's work, or just following your passions. Um, for me, when I was 7, um, obviously, I think my parents took it harder than I did myself. And, parents, they feel like it's their fault and because of the genetics and all this kind of stuff. So in their mindset, they get a little bit more, it's a lot of self-blaming. Just letting them know it is not their fault whatsoever. It's nothing you can control. And none of us are going to blame the parents for the situation. It's not something we can control. And at the same time, living with ushers is the only life we know. So in my situation, I was born profoundly deaf, so I never had a hearing loss. So because of that, I don't know what it's like to actually hear. But I was grateful that I did get cochlear implants early as possible, because it did help me a lot in terms of going to a public school and dealing with the world out there. And I believe that it did help me a lot. And there is going to be some struggles. And, for me as an usher's kid, like I will tell you, I was a very stubborn kid. I wanted to show that I was very independent and that I can do a lot of things, and just a lot of wanting to self-prove or prove to others, to their parents, their family, and friends that, just because they have these disabilities or so-called that other people's want to see as limitations, they are not. They're not a limitation. They're just more of an obstacle, and any obstacles you can go over. And so for me, when I, obviously thinking about when you get older and you're starting thinking about getting a car or for college and stuff, at the age when I was 15, when I started learning how to drive, my vision was in a place that I was able to do so. But when I thought about a long-term situation, I believe that it was easier to just not have a license in a car. One big thing, money. I mean, if you were to just depend on family, friends, or Uber, it's cheaper than insurance, car, and gas in general. So you're saving a lot of money in that way, and you don't have to worry about it or think about it. But there is that, annoyingness as to like if I need to get somewhere quick, like that it's easier if you had your own car. But there are a lot of services today that aren't even just part of a disability services that can provide that solution. And it has not really affected me. So like with driving, that didn't phase me. I actually prefer to not drive. It's just easier, and I don't have to stress about it. The parents don't have to stress about it because I'm sure they get a lot more anxiety about kids with ushers driving around. And so another thing with like technology, technology is incredibly advanced now today. And than it was 20 years ago when I was a kid getting a cochlear implant. So for a lot of the new parents, they're even people today, there is a lot of stuff out there that are able to help. And for me, with the blindness and the way that I deal with it and the way I think about it is that the way technology is evolving, I don't believe that anybody's going to be blind for the rest of their life. They may have to deal with it for a few years or a decade. We don't know. But I definitely do have hope in terms of believing that I'm not going to be blind for the rest of my life. It's only going to be a phase in my life. And so with that, there's a lot of positives. One, I sleep like a baby. I usually say to anybody that's cheering, I always go up to them and be like, it sucks to be you. It sucks to be you. And one of the beautiful things about being deaf is that whenever things get rough and whenever there's situations where you need to check out, you can check out. You literally can just take your device off and just check out and process, and just be in your own world, and go with the motions versus where hearing people, they got to deal with it. They can't escape it. They can't do any of that. So for me, I tend to find a lot of like positives in terms of like whether if it's money or sleeping, whatever it is out in the world. Of course, when I was a kid, I did get bullied at first, in elementary school. But the only reason I did is because a lot of kids or anybody in public school systems, private, whatever it is, they're not educated as to what it is. And so that's one of the really important things that we do have to do. And it's just part of having ushers is constantly educating people. And like I said before, we're extremely stubborn, or at least I am myself. We're not going to want to ask for help. Most of us aren't going to want to. Most of us are going to want to try to prove ourselves, try to show that we do have our independency, whether if we have to use a cane or a vision or cochlear devices. The only thing that's really important with us that we ask of anybody is to have patience. Because with hearing, even though I got it at an early age, it still takes work to be able to hear. And so a lot of times our main vocabulary is what? Can you repeat that? Huh? I'm sorry. Like, at least it is for me. But it's just a main big thing that we ask for is patience. And it's really just about how educated are these people are on these topics. And that is truly the best way to avoid any miscommunication or bullying or anything like that. Because when I did educate a lot of people, whether it's just friends and, gossip and like topics in school, they spread like a wildfire. So you can tell a handful of people and the rest will follow. And for me, I honestly didn't deal with any bullying throughout middle school or high school, because of my disability. And that's because I let people know about my situation and not neglect it or hide from it or try to fly under the radar. The more, as a kid, you are already standing out by having ushers or just having hearing loss. But it's okay to stand out. Eyes are not going to be on you all the time. Most people are always in their own world. So for me, we do understand that we're always in fear of like, what do people think? And like, are they always talking about me? Do they see less of me? 95% of the time, I will tell you, they're probably not even thinking about that. So there's a lot of fear and stress that goes into carrying it. And I would just have to say, yes, it makes sense to have it, but at the same time, most of the people aren't going to be thinking about it in terms of how they see you. And so I'm just kind of rambling. But let's see what else. There's a lot. So with the vision going away, it did affect my college plans because I received a diagnosis at a very early age. So the doctor assumed that I would be blind by the age of 20. And so when I was going through the process of college and applications and stuff, I got really stressed about the choices that I would have to make. And mainly because I didn't know if I was going to have my vision for all 4 years of college or only halfway through. And so because of that, I've discovered a lot more options. And so what I ended up doing was going to community college for the first 2 years of my life. And I received an associate's degree in film because that's one of my biggest passions. And for me, it's like you don't always have to make the decision now. And as it made seems like time is running out in terms of your vision and stuff, it's not the case. There is plenty of time. Like, what adults are always constantly telling kids, like, you have the time all the time in the world to figure out what you want to do or discover your passions. And so that's what I did. Took the time to figure it out. And plus, community college, you're getting the same education as anywhere else for a very small fraction of the price. So in a way, it's easier. And with accommodations, there is a lot that do help. And there's a lot that, kind of can get annoying. For me, always wanting to prove myself and being stubborn, I did not take advantage of that. And looking back, I kind of wish I did. My grades were still good. I survived high school with 3.5 GPA without using much of accommodations. And that's because I had my parents that never doubted me. Nobody ever saw me less than anybody. And that really helps in terms of how you feel about yourself. And there is no perfect way of dealing with it. Everybody has their own way and their own path. And truly, it's something that we all just have to discover on our own. But that's what I went through, and that's what I dealt with. And I'm going to wrap it up from there.
Thank you, Jake. So I just wanted to bring attention to the raising hands feature. If anyone does have a question about tech or accessibility, you can, whatever's easiest for you, you can put that in Q&A or in the chat function as well, and we'll do what we can to help you out. So thank you so much, Jake, for sharing all of that. And you touched on the bullying. Divya touched on the bullying. We got some questions about that through the app as well. And it's really helpful to hear how you education. I think that's a really good tip. The more people understand, the more kids and anyone else around you understands about what you're dealing with, I think that's less likely to happen. So thank you. Valerie, I know you went several years trying to get that Usher syndrome diagnosis, feeling with your mother's intuition that it was very much a thing. What changed for you and your daughter once you did get that diagnosis?
This is Valerie speaking. And again, I think Jacob keeps stealing the things I'm going to say. But I need to remind myself that she's living with this and has always lived with this. The diagnosis was a change for me as mom, but it wasn't a change for her. So I really like that, Jake, you just said that, because it's exactly it. It was a lot for me, and I felt like my world was turned upside down, and my dreams for my child's future were just shattered, and all this was like at the beginning, right? And then I had to take a step back and be like, but she's done all this already. She can do this and this and this and this. And don't get me wrong, there's still days as a mom that you have that parent guilt that Jake was talking about. You have that like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Oh my gosh, how am I going to provide this to my kid? Because it's different. And you don't have a lot of other parents that are going through the same feelings. But then you stop, and I mean, my daughter's on the swim team at school. My daughter rock climbs. She does gymnastics. She does everything any other kid would do. And when I told her I was doing this panel, because I do want to respect her feelings, because it is me sharing my story, but it's sharing her story too. So I did tell her that I was going to do the panel. And I said, because you know what? Does mommy ever say that you can't because you're deafblind? She's like, no. I was like, right. So I want to make sure other parents know that you can, even though you're deafblind, you can. That's not a negative thing. It's a positive thing. You can be successful. You can do anything you want to do. And so it has been a challenge and hard to get there. And there's days that I just want to be like, okay, it's fine, you don't have to do it. It's fine, you don't have to do it. Oh, you couldn't see it. Well, no. As a mom, I need to be reminded that no, she can still do everything I expect her to do, and more half the time. And one of the questions is about technology, and I am so grateful with how technology is nowadays, especially living through this pandemic and everything coming on Zoom and everything right at our fingertips. That was huge for us when schools were closed and everything was through technology. It's out there where we were able to find bigger screen devices. Now, granted, there's a lot of teaching that has to be done, a lot of educating that has to be done, where we have to remind the teachers to wear a plain top. We have to remind the background. We have to make sure the lighting's okay, everything like that for my daughter to be able to access everything. But the cool part was after we went through all that at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, we've been in person for most of the school year, but the teachers became more creative on how to bring the materials to her in her classroom when we were in person. So now she has a tablet right on her desk. So when there's presentations or anything up on the board, it's right here for her. And that helps her so much. And I don't know that we would have thought of that if we weren't already using it through Zoom and through the virtual learning. So technology for us has been great. Just that ability to bring everything right to her vision, her field of vision, whatnot. And it's really helped her education a lot. Videos, being an ASL user, having videos and read alouds and everything is just amazing for her. I feel like I've off track. What was the rest of the question? I have the mom brain, see?
No worries. This is Krista speaking. Really just anything else you've mentioned, technology, anything else that's changed, both positive and negative, since learning about Priyanka's Usher syndrome?
I would probably say the biggest positive for us is getting to know the deafblind community. And I didn't even, working in deaf education, I didn't even really know anything about the deafblind community before this diagnosis. And now we've got these really amazing people around us that surround us and remind me as a mom that my daughter can, and my daughter has people she can look up to. That's huge because she is a unicorn. You know, there's not very many Usher's kids. There's not very many ASL user Usher kids. And she's alone sometimes. So for me to be able to make these connections and she be able to see people signing in, explaining things in her language, that's amazing. So I guess that could be technology too, right? Because it doesn't just have to be in our area. We're able to connect with people all over the world, which is really cool. So there's definitely positives and negatives. The positives right there. The negatives is, I think I already said it, it's hard sometimes, but that's why we have each other, right?
Thank you, Valerie. This is Krista speaking. I want to be conscious of our time. We have about 25 minutes left on the panel. So for the panelists, I'm going to move on to the last question that you all had seen earlier. What is one resource or piece of advice you'd like to share with the community? This could be a good positive note to leave the rest of us off with. So Lawreen, would you like to start?
Sure. So this is Lawreen speaking. So resource and advice, because my situation is a little bit different, where I may not have leveraged as many of the resources as some of the other panelists, I think the way I would like to answer this question is, what piece of advice can I give? I learned from myself that being comfortable and being open with others, you know, whether it's your coworkers, your family, your network, about your situation and what you're dealing with, really is a game changer. Because when they don't understand or they don't realize, hey, you can't see well at night, or if you are at a meeting or a party and there's a lot of people speaking, you have trouble hearing somebody, when they understand the situation what you're working with and you share that with them, I have found everybody to be more than willing to help me, accommodate me. Even when I go to conferences for work and I'm trying to have one-on-one conversation and it's too loud, I tell the other party and they are more than happy to find a quiet corner somewhere else, and we can continue the conversation. So my advice is, it took a while for me to get there, but when I was comfortable with sharing with pretty much anybody what I had to deal with and what my challenges were, I found that it opened up a lot of doors because they were willing to work with me, and that really changed a lot of things. So I would give the same advice to you, which is not only take advantage of the tools that are available, the other panelists talk about technologies that are available today. Some of them were not available when I was going through school, for example, and other ones, I think I was partly in denial, like, I don't really need that. But I found it really makes a difference. You do have to find out what works for you and take advantage of that. But really, our community, I think our society today is so much more open, so much more accommodating of people being different, people being unique. And I think for us to step out and kind of put ourselves out there actually really comes back and benefits us. So that's my advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawreen. This is Krista speaking. Divya, would you please share with us one resource or piece of advice you'd like to share with the Usher community?
So my advice or resources for family and children that have to deal with ushers: sit together as a family, have a meeting, during your personal time, and listen to your children, what they tell you. They want to talk to you. It's important that you pay attention and listen to them and be patient with them. They all have a diverse need for communication, using sign language or doing tactile. So parents, you need to work with your children. Teach them about life, what's right in life, what's wrong in life. And encourage them, encourage your children, tell them that they can do things. Show them what their abilities are. If things don't work out, I'm sure you can find something else that will work, that will be successful, that matches their abilities, their accessibility as well. The siblings, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, the whole family, friends should be involved with communication. It's very important. And for school, it's important that children have advocates. Parents are advocates. It's important to know what your children needs. If you know what they need, you need to tell them. Maybe it's technology, large print, braille, whatever it is that your child needs, you need to advocate for that. And I also encourage you to keep a positive attitude. Education is so important, and you want your children to be successful, like I have become successful. And you don't want them to have the experience that I had. It wasn't always positive. So I think it's more important to think positively regarding education, doing more, being more motivated, thinking about goals and the future for your children. My advice is try not to compare normal children that you might have that are hearing and sighted, to children that have disabilities, that can't see or hear. Of course, the children that have disabilities have some envy because they see their siblings having an education, getting a job, having a social life, friends, cars, and so on. They have so much access. And the child that has the disability feels inept. I don't have friends. I don't have a social life. I'm so isolated. So don't compare your children. That causes a lot of jealousy. And that happened in my family as well. There was envy because my sister and brother were successful. They became more successful than me. They had a vehicle to drive, they owned a home, and I didn't have that. So I try not to be jealous or be envious of anyone. Just be happy with the fortunate opportunities you have. And it's important to encourage your children to see what they do have, not to focus on what others have. So it doesn't cause rivalry or jealousy in the household. It's important to show cooperation, support, positive attitudes, positive influences for everyone in the house. Everyone has a different lifestyle. So I know as a disabled person, you feel less than because you can't access so many things and you become stressed out and paranoid. You shouldn't do that. Think positively. As you progress, things will be good.
Jake, what about you? What's your piece of advice for the community?
This is Jacob speaking. So my piece of advice, I would start with anybody with ushers. You know, I don't have to tell you that we all know that we can do anything that we set our mind to, and we are more than capable of doing what we want. And there shouldn't be any reason as to why our disabilities are going to keep us from our careers that we want to pursue or opportunities that we can or can't take. We all know we can, and it cannot be said enough, and we all hear it all the time. And it's because it's true, and I believe that it's not an issue, and it does take a little bit more work, but it is always fun surprising people. So for adults or families that don't have ushers, I was a kid with ushers that had no family members or friends that had ushers or any hearing or vision loss. I've been able to connect with people with ushers through the coalition and through organizations for the deaf and blind community. But for them, all we ask is just for patience. That's the true key of the situation, is patience and open communication. And I do believe it's important to be able to have that communication with your family and friends and to be more open-minded, because once you communicate more about yourself and your situation, how you feel about it, how it is for you in that time period, it allows people to be more comfortable and more open around you. And because of that, I've never really had any problems in terms of making friends or relationships with my family. And that is just patience and just be open about it. You'd be surprised with the amount of people that do want to help or be involved.
Thank you, Jake. Mm-hmm. Valerie, as a parent, what advice would you offer?
This is Valerie speaking, and I think I've said it a few times already. Find other parents, because we're all going through the same things. We all have the same feelings. I was talking to a parent of an usher's child yesterday, and just I hear you. That's all. just to know you have that support. There's a lot of, and I'm sure you guys are going to talk about this. Sorry if I'm stealing this, but there's a lot of family to family groups that are out there, and they're amazing. I'm a co-facilitator for an ASL group where it's fully in ASL, it's fully accessible. We don't use interpreters, so it's just through sign language, where it's deafblind parents. And sometimes we just talk about the weather, but sometimes we talk about those things that really need to be talked about with a trusting environment and people that really get you. So I think that that's really important. And I see some questions about like education and whatnot. We talk about that a lot. I'm very fortunate to have another mom in our group that has an older daughter. So I can be like, hey, did your daughter do this? Oh yeah, we got that going too. You know, just to know those phases are all normal as you parent, because parenting's not easy. So as long as you find those other parents and those family to family, I think Nancy, you said you're going to put that information out. Yes. And so then we can get more people involved and more groups. It's really invaluable. I mean, it's amazing.
Thank you, Valerie. So I'd like to move on to some questions that were submitted through the Whova app as well. And a few questions that keep coming up are around work and accommodations in the workplace. So anyone on the panel, if you'd like to give any examples of occupations or jobs or work that a deafblind person can do, and I think may do, and I think, you know, we've spoken to this, like can do, really, I think the list is very long. But more specifically, how would you recommend getting help advocating for accommodations that you might need at work? And does anyone want to raise their hand and be the first to go? Jake, please go for it.
Sure. This is Jacob speaking. So throughout high school and college, I was working multiple jobs, and I believe that in terms of finding the work, there's a lot of resources. And what I use is like we have different departments of like rehabilitation, and there's a lot of programs out there that do want to help the deaf and blind find jobs. And you'd be surprised, it's not as limited as it sounds. And for my situation, I was able to work at like an equestrian center where I was giving riding lessons to kids with disabilities like autism, Down syndrome, and cerebral palsy. And so that's what I did in my high school years. And for me, in terms of whether it's accommodations or the fear of like not being able to fulfill your position in that job, you don't have to worry about that, because in a lot of places, for me in California, and I believe it is for anywhere, is that nobody can discriminate or deny your disability. And if you were to get any position in any job, which you can in anything, and once you get that job, they have to accommodate you. It is not in a situation for you that you need to figure out what job can you do. It is for them to figure out how they can accommodate you. And so with that, I also worked as a camp counselor, and I worked over the whole weekend. And so I'm there from Friday afternoon till Sunday afternoon, overnight with kids. And so we're out in the mountains. It's a wildlife science camp. And the only thing that I've noticed that has given me some form of limitation is with my night blindness. So with night blindness, I definitely need a lot more light. It's very dangerous at nighttime when you're in the wilderness, and you can stumble onto anything. Of course, I'm probably like psyching my mother out by having this job, just being nowhere, no service, nothing. But I love it at the same time. And for my job, when I got it, and all you have to do is you have to communicate as to what you need to do in order to be efficient at your job. And for me, with my night blindness, I cannot do night hikes. At my job, we do night hikes. And so what my boss does is that she will accommodate me and pull me out of night hikes and do something else. And so for me, I, help with organizing or cleaning, or we have campfire nights. And so during most night hikes, I'd be busy making s'mores, which, it's a lot more fun for me. You can sneak in a snack over here and there. So it's just, for me, it's just, as long as you communicate to your boss as to what you need, there shouldn't be an issue, because they have to. They really have to be able to accommodate to anybody. And it doesn't go for anybody with disabilities. It just goes for anybody. And if there is discrimination, or they're saying they can't accommodate to you and they're going to let you go, that is extremely illegal. They actually cannot do that for those reasons. And so I just keep repeating myself. It works. It's just communicate, and they will figure out how to make it work for you. And it's not as big of an obstacle as most people may think it is.
Thank you, Jake. This is Krista speaking. Would anyone else like to touch on that topic? Accommodations in work? Divya, yes, please.
Hi, this is Divya speaking. So I'd like to tell you something positive. I'm working for the City Hall of Orlando. It's a government job. I work for disability accessibility, and soon I'll be getting a promotion to another position. And that is a great opportunity, even for your children, to be able to take advantage of that. There's going to be some frustration and difficulty finding work, if they're not able to access the education. But it is important to be patient. Like, for example, I worked for 8 years for a very short time during the summer, because it took me a while to get exposure to work and increase my knowledge and abilities. And that affected my skills, and that allowed me to become more successful at work now. Working is very important, of course. That's how you support yourself in life. But it doesn't matter if it takes a long time or a short time. It took me a really long time, and I had to really be patient. And I finally got the job that I wanted. Now, VR, vocational rehab, doesn't always have the ability to help you all the way. They may give you some advice, or maybe they don't necessarily do what you think is your goal. So you have to advocate for yourself. You have to believe in yourself, do a self-analysis, figure out what you really, really want to do. This is something that you're passionate about. And then you let VR know, because they may give you other opportunities and you may accept them, but you may not be happy with those opportunities. And then for me, they weren't helpful. I went on my own job search. I utilized other people who may be aware that there are job openings. And that's how I was able to locate employment. And it was very positive. And we have a very good relationship. I have accessibility to different equipment. And also regarding school, it's the same thing. You need to be assertive. You have to make self-determinating decisions, discuss it in your IEP, so the school can provide the different services instead of thinking, oh no, I don't know, and I'm not sure. Believe in yourself. And if you know what you want, then you have more power. And they'll listen to what you want and then be able to provide it. So what's important is being a self-advocate, being confident in yourself, being strong, not feeling oppressed or stressed out or worried what's going to happen in the future, thinking negatively. Now, you have to get rid of all of that, start thinking positively, being patient, and when it's the right time, the right things will happen, and you will be so happy that you have achieved that and have had great luck, and then your experiences will change. And it's important for your children as well to see you grow, be successful, saying that I could do it, I can do everything. That will build your self-esteem and your children's self-esteem.
Thank you, Divya.
As well.
This is Krista speaking. I'm conscious of the time. We have a few more minutes, but I want to ask a question that was translated for us. This will likely be directed to Jake, and just as quickly as we can, but what helped you to feel motivated starting to work? Because this mother has a son who is 16 and has Usher syndrome. He doesn't want to try to work because he says he can't and is afraid. Do you have any piece of advice for this mother or this son?
Yeah. For me, I was lucky because I did had a lot of self-motivation in order to want to work, because I wanted to make my own money. I wanted to be able to do the things I want to do, buy the things I wanted to buy as a kid in high school. But for me, I think the best way to go about it is that you just need a lot of reassurance to an understanding as to how, I don't know how it is for every state, but in my state, they're very accommodating and they're very open, and a lot of places do not discriminate or separate disability people with able people from being hired. And so I think it's just because of me, I was very lucky. And I do believe that we're all very stubborn. I cannot say that enough. We're not going to want to say that we want help, that we need help. Definitely some not push, but it's just more of like, we all just need a reminder that it is not as hard as it seems, and it's not as scary as it seems. And for any job, there are other ways as to being able to work and be able to be more comfortable in a work environment. And a lot of jobs, they offer many different positions, and they have a lot of different ways and needs. Like for me, growing up, I was worried about working at a job where there's customer service or something, where I would have to be at a register shearing and like taking orders. I know I would fail and butcher their orders in that case. But the food industry, the customer service industry, that's not the only thing that's out there. And I believe it just takes a little bit of research in terms of what do you want to do? What are you more comfortable with? And hypothetically, I lost my train of thought, but it just, you just have to communicate with it and ask you like what makes them comfortable and like what can they do, or they feel comfortable or safe to do for their job. So I think it's just, for me, it just takes a little bit more reassurance and open communication as to about it. And you never know until you try, honestly. And you'd be surprised that a lot of workplaces and managers and bosses are a lot more open to helping you out, because they're not going to hire you and then leave you to the side to figure it out on your own, because that doesn't help them. That doesn't help their business. So they're going to do what they can to accommodate you and make it easier for you, that is efficient for you and their business. So I understand where a lot of the fear comes in. And I had a lot of fear in terms of starting, but once I found something, I was able to get excited and be able to get more comfortable with the idea in terms of what I was doing. So it really just depends.
Right. Thank you, Jake. This is Krista speaking. We are at the end of our time now, but there are so many resources out there to help continue this conversation. We've asked the panelists, many are willing to have more questions posed to them through the Whova app, so definitely take advantage of that. Valerie mentioned a number of family-to-family groups, phone calls, monthly connection opportunities. We will post information about those and other resources on this session to help you all find the next step to continue this conversation. As we like to say, you all are the experts living with Usher syndrome, so please connect with one another and share your experiences. And thank you so much for attending our first live session, and please enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care, everyone.